When we look at a flower, we see beauty, right? We see color, this little piece of nature's art. But honestly, beneath that pretty surface, there's a wild story of strategy, survival, and a single, all-consuming mission to make the next generation.
Have you ever really, truly wondered what a flower is for? I mean, it's not just sitting there to look nice for us. It is an incredibly sophisticated piece of biological machinery, and boy, does it have a story to tell.
So in this explainer, we're going to follow that mission from the very beginning to the very end. We'll take a peek inside the flower factory, we'll track the great pollen transfer, uncover some truly ingenious strategies for success, and we'll even get to witness a seed's very first breath.
Okay, first up, to really get what this mission is all about, we've got to get familiar with the equipment. So let's take a tour of the reproductive machinery that makes the whole thing possible.
I want you to think of a flower as a high-tech factory. You've got the flashy exterior, the petals, and they're designed to grab all the attention. Then, inside, you have the production lines, the male parts, called the stamen, and the female part, which is known as the carpel.
Okay, let's break this down a bit. First, you've got the petals. They're basically the plant's billboards, using bright colors and smells to attract customers, or couriers. Then there's the stamen, that's the male part. It's made of the anther, which produces the precious cargo, pollen, and the filament that just holds it up high. And the carpel, that's the final destination. It has the stigma, which is a sticky little landing pad for pollen, the style, which is the pathway down, and the ovary, right at the base, protecting the ovules, the future seeds. See? Every single part has a super precise role in this one big objective. All right, let's move on to the next stage of a mission. Now that our factory has produced the pollen, well, it has to be delivered. This is the crucial first step in the whole journey, and it's called pollination.
So put simply, pollination is just the act of getting that pollen from the male anther to the female stigma. It sounds easy, but this is probably the single greatest challenge a plant faces. It has to get its genetic material from point A to point B without being able to move. And plants have two main ways of getting this done. Over on the left, you see self-pollination. This is kind of an internal job, or pollen just moves from the anther to the stigma of the very same flower, or maybe another flower on the same plant. But on the right, we've got cross-pollination, and that is a much longer, riskier journey between two completely different plants.
So this makes you wonder, right? Why even bother with the risky journey of cross-pollination? The answer comes down to one thing: genetic variation. Self-pollination is reliable, for sure, but it produces offspring that are basically clones of the parent. This makes the whole population vulnerable. Cross-pollination, though, it mixes up the gene pool, creating all this wonderful variation that gives the species a much better shot at adapting to things like new diseases or a changing climate. It's all about long-term survival.
Now, this is where it gets really interesting. How plants actually pull off cross-pollination. Since they can't exactly get up and walk around, they've evolved some incredibly clever strategies to basically hire couriers to transport their precious cargo for them.
So how does that pollen make the leap? I mean, how does it travel across fields and forests and gardens to find its perfect target?
Well, plants have essentially outsourced the job to two main delivery services. You've got your busy insects, like bees, and you've got the good old ever-present wind.
And this just brilliantly shows how a flower's design is perfectly tailored to its chosen courier. On the left, the insect-pollinated flower is like a vibrant advertisement. It's got big, colorful petals, a sweet smell, and a sugary nectar reward. But on the right, the wind-pollinated flower could not care less about appearances. It's all stripped down, purely functional, and built for maximum efficiency.
Let's really get into these adaptations. An insect-pollinated flower, it invests in big, bright petals and nectar because, hey, it needs to advertise. Its pollen is sticky or spiky to make sure it latches onto an insect's body. Now, the wind-pollinated flower, totally opposite strategy. It makes tons and tons of tiny, lightweight, smooth pollen grains that are designed to be carried on the breeze. It has zero need for fancy petals or nectar. And just look at the stigma. Small and sticky to grab pollen off an insect, but huge and feathery to act like a perfect net to catch pollen floating in the air. It really just boils down to this: different jobs, different tools.
So, the pollen has arrived, delivery complete, but the mission is not over yet, not even close. Let's get to the climax of this story, the moment of fertilization and the birth of a brand new seed.
You see, once the pollen lands, fertilization is the next critical step.
This is the exact moment when the male genetic material from that pollen grain fuses with the female genetic material that's been waiting inside the ovule. This amazing fusion creates the very first cell of the new plant, the zygote.
So here's how that incredible microscopic journey happens. After it lands on that sticky stigma, the pollen grain grows a tiny tube. This pollen tube literally tunnels all the way down through the style, carrying the male nucleus with it. It's like a microscopic guided missile. It finds and enters the ovule, and finally, the male and female nuclei fuse. Mission accomplished. And the results of this successful fusion are just profound. The fertilized ovule develops into a seed, which contains the tiny embryo of the next generation and its own packed lunch, a food supply. At the same time, the ovary that's surrounding it starts to swell and ripen, and it becomes the fruit, which is designed to protect the seed and help it get around.
So now we have a seed, this tiny package of potential. But it's dormant. It's just waiting. What does it actually need to finally spring to life and begin its own journey? Well, that process is called germination.
For a seed to germinate, it needs 3 critical signals from its environment. First, it needs water, which kind of activates all its internal chemistry and makes it swell up. Second, it needs oxygen, which it uses to breathe and release energy for growth. And third, it needs a suitable temperature, so its enzymes can work at peak efficiency. You get those 3 things right, and boom, life begins.
From that whole intricate dance inside the flower to the final sprouting of a seed, it is just a process of incredible precision and resilience. And when you think about it, within every single one of those seeds lies the potential for new life, and maybe even an entire ecosystem. This entire system, this secret sex life of plants, it really underpins so much of life here on Earth, from the food we eat to the very air we breathe. So it's worth asking, in our world of changing climates and disappearing habitats, what do you believe is the single biggest threat to this delicate and absolutely essential dance of reproduction today?